With the full base set of Elestrals finally revealed, I wanted to make this video series discussing every single card in there. I'm organizing this by element and then finally generic cards, so that'll be 6 total videos. In each video, I'll be discussing each of the cards that I group in those elements / generic, and I'll be going over my general thoughts of those cards, its meta viability both in base set as well as in the future, and some fun factors about the card, because I really want to highlight that even if it's not meta, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do about it at the casual scene. So if this interests you, let's get right into it. So what is the third element I'm reviewing here? It should be third to be uploaded. So changing pace from the more aggressive decks that fire and earth are. You get more of stall and combo stuff with water here, so very refreshing change. But first, I'm going to talk about probably the cards that are going to form the most viable deck. According to Jay Johnny, that using these some combination of these cards will definitely form a decent meta deck. Still haven't tested out myself, but he's been testing it, that's what he says. So I'm going to say that here as well. And I figure it's a good focus as well, because I do think that even if you switch things up a little bit, it's still the best version of water right now. And that is a package using Foamee and cool cards such as Sluggle, Apheros, Moustacean, possibly Krakkid, Galaxea, as well as other support cards such as Verutaqua, and a great counter rune in Tsunami, paired with maybe Atlantis, the Divine Rune, not the Divine Rune, the Stadium Rune. So let's just kind of start talking about that right now. Foamee here is kind of, I think, the linchpin to all this, because on destruction, you could just float into any one Water Spirit Elestral. You can pull whatever you need out of your deck. If you need more stall, you've got cards for that. If you need to switch stuff around to be more offensive next turn, you got that as well. It just needs to be destroyed in battle. And sometimes, yeah, your opponent will have an out to this card that doesn't let it float, but then your opponent's using resources to do that on a Foamee as opposed to one of your other Elestrals, because of the threat of what you could go into as opposed to the threat itself, which is funny here. So that makes this card super good for water as well. It technically has some other synergies outside of water as well. It just needs to flow into a 1 water, like a Elestral with an enchantment cost of 1 water, but it doesn't need to be enchanted with water. So it could technically fuel a ton of other strategies just for maybe running off element ascensions. That's a possibility. I've seen that done before, where you can just flow into Foamee with something on fire and then go into Leonite. That's pretty cool. So just all in all, Foamee has a lot of potential with that float effect, as well as really obnoxious to deal with if you can't just destroy it with an effect. And I really like that. So for meta viability, right now, I don't know if it's the most viable. I think it's going to be off. If anything, it's going to be fringe or more along the anti-meta kind of tier 1.5, tier 2 kind of thing, whatever, however you want to look at it. Not the decks that will always top, but will kind of always be there, turning out some results, seeing some success. This is definitely a more skill-intensive kind of card, and I quite like that. I also think it has a ton of future potential as well. Just being able to flow into anything is super powerful. Still be able to bait out your opponent's like removal effects, pretty good as well. Obviously, we're probably going to see more removal effects, mean more answers to Foamee, but then it's also a matter of what deck are the decks that exist there. Do they have space for those kind of cards and such? So it's going to be, Foamee's going to be one of those that I think will always have potential. It just depends on the meta and what's in it. As for fun viability, this card's so fun. Just being able to flow into anything can enable some crazy stuff. We've already seen that. We're only going to see more of it since it's any Elestral with 1 water enchantment cost. I mean, it's only going to get more targets over time as well. So if anything, watch out for this card in fun casual play for sure, and definitely keep it in mind during competitive play as well. Moving on to one of the best cards that synergize with Foamee, and that is Sluggle. Because one of the things about Foamee is, sure, you can keep bringing out an Elestral, but it's also expensive. You have to use 1 Water Spirit every single time to re-enchant. But when you cast a Sluggle off of it, you get 3 back from your Underworld. Meaning that, sure, you lost the Foamee, but now you have a Sluggle out on board, and you kind of start this whole exchange with really, depending on how you look at 1 or 2 additional Water Spirits. It just depends on if you count like what's on the Sluggle and what's on the Foamee and such. But you end up with more Water Spirits than you started out with. That's a great way to kind of keep this engine up. And while I think it will be more a tech card in a more meta deck, just because this doesn't have any impact on board versus just recovering Water Spirits, for decks that maybe aren't as, that are more Ascension focused, this card is really nice because you have it on board, you just ascend over it anyway. That's pretty awesome. And so right now, meta viability, I think it is more, it's not the most meta viable. I think, again, it will be one of those cards that's maybe like attack card in the set. If you need the extra recursion off of a Foamee and don't need necessarily anything else, I can see it being played there. I think this has a lot of potential in the future, especially if we see more Water Ascension decks become viable. Just the Spirit Recovery for just kind of going about your plays is really nice. And then for fun, yeah, this card's great for fun. For the same, it's just a phenomenal target off of Foamee where I think a lot of the Ascension decks for Water right now will exist for sure. And yeah, just being able to recover some spirits for an expensive deck will always be really good. Apheros here is a nuts card if you don't necessarily need to answer your opponent's board. Because just being able to flow into one of these off of Foamee and having it stick onto your turn, you can start doing some Nexus stuff to just draw cards and such, and it's great. If you can get a second one out here, that's double the trouble with it. And with the Poseidon Divine Rune, you don't have to leave these water spirits up on the Apheros. You can Nexus them back to the Poseidon, so they can't just attack over to get rid of them. They'll have to use a rune removal effect, which is really nice as well. So just being able to move spirits between itself, Poseidon, and then of course another Apheros on field, you're netting a ton of cards. Now, of course, you kind of have to make the choice. Do you want to just draw one and move one spirit around? Do you want to move two spirits around? It kind of depends. You're putting more spirits on board, meaning they're more susceptible to be destroyed. At the same time, you're drawing a lot of cards. So that's really, really great. It's not very proactive. Like, you're kind of hoping you're drawing into more proactive cards. But the nice thing is if it's only one Apheros, you get a chance to draw into more cards and then maybe make a proactive play on board. That's quite nice as well. And if it's two Apheroses, maybe you're drawing some counters to slow down your opponent to get into your more aggressive plays next turn. There's a lot of viability in this card. I think it's a bit varied in it, which definitely holds it back. And I definitely think you really need to know what you're digging for and what you're looking for, what your outs are, what your opponent can do. It's a very high skill card as well. But still, it's a phenomenal card for this deck and just raises the overall ceiling for it. And card draw is just great to make sure you have the card advantage and can keep putting out threats, keep up on board. So meta viable, it just depends on where water falls in the meta, but this will definitely be a card to include in there. It's really good at what it does. Future viability, yeah, I could see this card being a problem in the future when the meta slows down and we get more ways to move spirits around and such and get extra spirits on board. Drawing cards will always be good, and as long as you're drawing to pieces that let you play more proactively, it's going to be great. And for fun, yeah, this card just enables you to draw into cards you need for fun strategies and not brick as much with like Ascensions and such. So it's great there. Just be able to draw into one and then ascend into something really nice overall. So I like Apheros. Another fun strategy is maybe be able to move water spirits onto itself from a rune and then be able to a 3 spirit like your Majesea or any potential other 3 spirits in the future. That's also pretty cool. So a lot of potential for this card overall. Moustacean here is just a really solid Elestral. 6 defense. Everything at the 1 spirit mark needs some assistance to hit over it. 6 is insane. Even some 2 spirit Elestrals need some assistance to hit over it. There's plenty that hit 7 attack, but still, 6 is such a phenomenal break point. It's a phenomenal card to go in off of Foamee if your opponent has multiple attackers, because you can just shut down your opponent's turn by throwing down a Moustacean, because since they're in their battle phase, there isn't any battle phase destruction effects currently, meaning that your opponent just kind of has to pass. Passing the initiative back to you, that's great. You can do it for Ascension plays. You can do it for building wide. There's another card I'm going to talk about in 2 cards from now that also makes this card insane. Just really great. And the added effect to be able to switch its attack and defense, it gets expensive, but it's also really nice just to be able to answer the board with it on a dime if you really need to. Quite nice there. And you're not afraid to put in an attack as you can switch its attack if need be. You just have to be careful what your opponent does. It's not like the perfect solution. Like this card just gets bodied by Sorlet. But it's still a nice card nonetheless, just for that 6 defense, and is also synergies within water itself, which, again, we'll be getting into that. So competitive viability, I think, again, this is definitely a staple in water. It just depends on how meta viable water is compared to everything else. And it definitely has a chance. I think this will see play. I just don't know how it will convert. That's, I think, the big question here. Future potential. This one I find a bit hard to judge because it is expensive. It is a big body. So I don't necessarily see it being outcrept in terms of its big body status, but I could see maybe we get more 5 defense water Elestrals with some better effects, and that could edge this card out in deck space. So I think its future viability is limited. It just depends on what we get. And as for fun cards, I feel like it's the same case. It just depends on what we have. It's pretty good, but it's also pretty expensive as well. So yeah, it just depends on those cards. So watch out for this card. Actually, I changed my mind. I want to talk about the payoff now because it's just super relevant for Moustacean, and that is Galaxea. Just the ability to flip the attack and defense of any water enchanted Elestral is huge. They all have huge defensive stats, so just be able to drop a Galaxea and all of a sudden just go on the offense, really strong as well. So it's not the best float off of Foamee because it does come in with only 2 defense. But ideally what you're doing is Foamee was the last thing to be destroyed. Your opponent would pass that turn anyway, and now you can just throw a Galaxea, get a 5 attacker out, and start attacking. That's pretty good. If you have Galaxea in hand, you can float to Apheros, draw your cards, flip them, and now you have a 4 attacker and a 5 attacker. And this is what I was talking about with Moustacean. This card's nuts with Moustacean. Just being able to get a 6 attacker out and a 5 attacker, and that stat line's blocked behind a 5 attacker seems really strong as well. So, and it's not the most preposterous to get out with cards like Foamee helping us float into these stuff. So I see a lot of potential for this one. This one's also, funny enough, a good counter water card because if your opponent's trying to wall up, you can drop Galaxea, switch their attack and defense, and attack over stuff. So I think this is a strong sideboard card, but I think it is limited to how is water performing in the meta? How often are you seeing it? Do you need this out? That's going to be the big question. Meta viability, I think this one is one of the most viable water cards, even outside of if water's good or not, because it can be used as a counter strategy, and it's just an on-enchant 5 attacker. That's pretty strong overall. So I think this will pop up in some decks, say from just I want to run all the highest attack Elestrals, to also some fun shenanigans as we see in water that I have discussed. Future viability, again, just a great way to counter water, I think is the biggest way we're going to see some payoff. Though, I will say, as we keep getting some big defensive Elestrals to be able to switch attack, I think will always be good. I don't know if it'll always be a main deck card. I think it will always be a consideration for the sideboard, though. Fun strategies, this card will live and breathe fun strategies as long as you've got high defense stuff as well. Just, again, the ability to flip, as I've said before, really strong, has a lot of potential there. It just depends on what's in the fun sphere. Is it all high defense stuff that you want to switch around? That's going to be the big question for this card. Next card to talk about here is Krakkid. This one's always just going to be like a tech slot in a deck, but I think it's really funny the fact that you can just go Foamee, flow into Krakkid, shut down the opponent's Celestial. You can make the argument that maybe most time Moustacean is fine, but if you're like facing down an Ascension Celestial, the fact that you can just go Krakkid and shut it down is really funny to me. And yeah, I think it'll be pretty powerful, just kind of give you a chance to answer it. But again, I think it's no more than a tech slot. So it has some viability in that, but it's really fueled by being able to cheat it out with Foamee. So if you get more ways to cheat out, awesome. But at the same time, it also depends on do the cards water have answer what's in the meta, or do you need that Krakkid slot to really secure it? So that's the big question. I think if the answer is no, you just need good defensive bodies to stop them down. Over time, Krakkid won't be run just because we'll get probably some 5 defense Elestrals. And at that point, why are you running Krakkid when you can just run the 5 defense Elestrals? It's a bit more flexible in that sense, but it certainly has potential. So meta viability, I think it's just a fringe tech card in water if you really need it. But I think I don't think it'll be run in every single list. Future viability, it has definitely some future viability depending on what the meta is. If you really need its effect to shut down cards, it could solve that purpose with Foamee being a floater, if we get more floaters for water in the future. And finally, for fun strats, this card will be quite nice to kind of shut down your opponent's fun strat, sort of like an anti-fun card almost, which I think is funny. It will be good in those decks when you're facing off against a bunch of wild stuff as like a good card that can answer certain stuff that just high attack defenders like Moustacean can't. Moving away from good Foamee targets, like you can go into Verutaqua off of Foamee, but I think this is just a great counterplay card that water has access to. In Verutaqua, its ability just to destroy any defensive position Elestral is phenomenal if you're facing big body Elestrals, or if you're able to switch them to defense position, which you are able to, I should say. The reason I just don't see this being a big float off of Foamee is because a lot of times you would just flip up, it's Tsunami. I'll get to that card in a second. But you'll just flip up Tsunami and they won't destroy the Foamee anyway. And if they're attacking over the Foamee, they're attacked, so why are you going to Verutaqua? But it's just a nice card to have exist in water for some counterplay, and I think it's a great sideboard card against defensive decks. So right now, I actually don't think it's the most meta. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me back up. I do think it will be included in the meta deck with Tsunami being run, but again, it's not the biggest card. It won't always be live. It's just a nice card to have to easily get over some stuff. And I think moving forward in future metas, this card will be a good sideboard card if you're dealing against a lot of slower defensive decks and you just needs a way to pop them. Verutaqua is going to be phenomenal for that as well. And for fun strats, it's just another great way to answer some fun strats that you might want to throw in the sideboard or throw in your water deck as well. Speaking of Tsunami, just simple change all your opponents, all Elestrals to defense unless they're enchanted with water spirits. Just shuts down the battle phase unless they're against a water deck. Quite nice there. Gives you a chance to actually answer them, and a lot of times If they're attacking, they have lower defense stats, so you can easily get over them. I like this card. It's a simple, just stall card. That's it. It doesn't answer stuff, so it's not the best card overall. You need a way to answer your opponent's Elestrals on your following turn, but at the same time, as we see more answers come out in the future, just a really cheap stall card is great. And right now, it's honestly nuts because really, when answering Elestrals during the battle phase, we have 3 really good ones. We technically have Gorgon's Gaze as like a 4th one, but that one's really expensive for what it does. This one's just a simpler kind of version of Gorgon's Gaze that actually affects the entire board. I think it's really neat, and also some funny shenanigans maybe if you need to switch your stuff to defense in the future as well. So for meta viability, I do think this card has meta viability, just with the limited answers, and a lot of decks can just easily attack over and answer it next turn anyway. So that's pretty powerful when you think about it. It's just not a blanketly good card. You need to make sure you're answering stuff, or you just stalled for a turn. So it's a more skillful card. I think it also has some potential in the future as well because it's so efficient and cheap in what it does. Again, you just need to make sure that you know you can answer it. And as for fun decks are going to love this card as well. We already have some shenanigans that I'll cover. And oh, I forgot to mention Verutaqua for meta stuff. Just be able to switch up to defense and run into a Verutaqua is really good as well. So that's more for meta. I don't think it's a 2-card combo for sure, but at the same time, if you're wanting to run this for disruption, that's really good as well. So again, just meta, quite nice. I also see this being played in some other decks outside of water for future potential. Unless we get something that does it better, just a real efficient answer if you can easily attack over stuff. And for fun, we got a lot of fun stuff, as I mentioned with Verutaqua, and one more coming up soon. Next up, there is Atlantis, the Stadium Room. Just like all stadiums, same effect just for water enchanted. And it's quite nice, just make your cards a little beefier so they're a little hard to attack into. Also, when you throw out your Galaxea to swap their attack, just hits a bit higher. Also gets rid of your opponent's stadium rooms, which makes it a bit easier for them to attack over your stuff. All in all, quite nice. I feel like it's less impactful in water than most other decks. Oh, it's also next card for Apheros. That's quite nice. But I think it's less impactful in this deck than a lot of other decks. A lot of other decks can really use their stadiums to be more proactive, while this one, not as much. So I don't think it's as good. It still serves its purpose quite well and definitely is a consideration, especially if your other decks you're facing off against are running their stadiums. You want to keep them off theirs, and you might as well get a benefit when you do so. So I think it's more just its place in the meta that gives it the kind of final bit of power it needs to be run. But I also foresee other stadiums just kind of being better for water, help it stall tactics just a bit better. But at the same time, just like all other stadiums, it's quite nice if a deck can't really use the other stadiums. It just has a simple one to fall back on, like Atlantis as well. Meta viable, I think so, because I think a lot of decks will run the stadiums and you'll just want it to be able to pop your opponent's stadiums and give yourself a little buff. These small attack increments actually do really matter at this stage of the game right now. And for future viability, it just depends on what stadiums we get. Are they better for the decks that are topping, or do you even need a stadium? That's a good question. Fun strats, same thing, but with the added bonus of possibly having some cards reference Atlantis specifically to get off cool effects. So look out for that. Again, just like any stadium room, it's one I think you should always keep in mind, even if it isn't necessarily being played. So that's it for like the core of water that I think is going to be really good. Again, I think this will seek tournament play. I just don't know how it will convert. I think the other ones are just a bit better. I think the big thing is the other aggressive decks, such as Earth and Fire, are just easier to play than Water. I think Water is going to be more skillful. So I could see a scenario where Earth will have lower representation but convert very well if players are willing to put in the brain power to keep up the brain power to play it well. But I could also see it's just a bit too much brain power. Why are you not just bringing the more aggressive decks that you don't need to use as much of your brain for? Because fatigue is a big thing when playing in these long tournaments. But moving on from that, just another kind of one drop that we could easily float in off of Foamee. We got Typhlant here. Just on cast, discard a card random from your opponent's hand. Doesn't have a big board impact. This card isn't amazing right now because most people either discarding card is low impact because not many people are playing combo. Sure, you can snipe their one good card, but other times just don't have cards in hand, and Typhlant's just useless there. So all in all, is this meta right now? No. Does it have potential? I don't think so. I think it's an interesting effect, but just a random discard I don't think will ever be that impactful. I think you'll rather get a controlled discard if you're running discard. And for fun stuff, there is a fun deck to be made with this card in its Ascension form. I don't think it's that great. I don't know if many people will be attracted to it, honestly, to really realize the full effects of this. It just kind of feels like an odd one out, just a random discard. There's just better payoffs for it, honestly. So, Typhlant, I can't say it doesn't have potential. I just think it's very low that we'll actually see its potential. For that, rather, we would see a deck that can utilize this. I guess a good way to put it is, if with this discard, it would need some sort of synergy with the deck, and I just don't know if we'll ever see a deck that is like, yes, I want Typhlant's discard. I think you'll find better synergies elsewhere. Moving on to a card that I think is a lot better, we've got Capregal here. Love this card so much. 7 attack means it can easily attack over stuff, and you can just recur stuff from your underworld, so while going tall, you also go wide, and that's very great to get more synergies back. You can proc Sluggle again, set up Apheros for next turn, set up a big body on Moustacean. It is enchant and defense, so like you can't attack with it right away. But unfortunate, but I understand why. But still, it's like getting extra body on board. It becomes hard to deal with your opponent. Same reason why from Earth, like Viscerus was really good. You just get some more bodies. It actually protects Capregal from resting on your laurels, funny enough. So I like this card. It's got a lot of great utility. Only become better as we get more water Elestrals that can be enchanted from the underworld. Yeah. Don't want to enchant Galaxea off of this, though. You don't want to switch it to a 4 defense. So it's a bit at odds with this, and I think that's the reason why I don't know if it will be run in a competitive water deck right now. I think people will try to, but I think you might see more success with Galaxea. But there's also the argument to be made that you either go Capregal or Galaxea. That's another argument to be made as well. It just kind of depends, but it's also a 2-spirit Celestial. It's more easily punished, and since your opponent has a chance to answer it before you can build a wide board, it does need a lot of skill. It does need some timing. It might just be a dead card in hand that you'd rather have another card for. That being said, though, I think it's super fun. So meta viability, maybe. I don't think so. I think even though this is probably one of the best 2-spirit Elestrals because it builds your board wide, I just think it does it a bit too slow for the meta, and I think you'd just be better off running more of the 1 spirit engine. But I can't say that some decks might not want to run it. And for future viability, I do think this has future viability. It's got a great utility effect if you need to recur stuff and Ascensions become better. Can't write this card off, but I do think where this card will exist the most is in the fun space, just being a fun kind of top end to secure a game your board state, abuse some effects. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it will only get better with time. Moving on to another mini package here, we've got Smoltuga and Krakatuga kind of synergizing with Fire, a Fire Water deck. So Smoltuga is quite nice. It's got a big body, and it can search out a 1 spirit or one Fire enchantment cost Elestral. So you can search out a Fire Elestral to answer the board. I don't think this card will be run in an aggressive fire deck because it's too slow and it's defensive. But for like a slower kind of burn deck that you see that this Smoltuga and really Krakatuga support, this card's great. Just be able to grab your neck roughs, maybe your Wormite to answer something while you stall out. Yeah, and thin your deck so you can more easily draw into other burn cards like Eruption as well, or your Krakatugas. I quite like this card. I think it's a big body with a good value effect. It's not going to be widespread seen. It's going to be more for specific decks, and I think it fits that niche very well, as opposed to something like Rummagem, which is just good in any Earth deck unless you really can't afford how slow it is. Smoltuga, just more specific for that water-fire combo, is quite nice. Yeah, so for competitive viability, I don't think it's very competitively viable. Will he play in the future? Not unless you really need that value to search out a Fire Elestral on a water body. Like, Fire Water is a good type. For fun, though, love this card for Fire Water decks. It's going to be a great card just to be able to search out your pieces as well, such as Krakatuga, which we'll get to right now. Krakatuga here is really the payoff for Fire Water. It's got a built-in eruption on its body, which is quite nice, and has great defense to boot, mind you, to be super defensive. And then when any player casts eruption, you target destroy a card on the field. It's pretty much the water-fire version of Lagan. Only it's limited to 1 card, but that's fine. And I think that actually works really well, because while you're trying to build up into Krakatuga, you can just hold on to your eruptions. You don't have to use them. So I can definitely see a world where you use water to stall, maybe use some of the fire cards that you search off of Smoltuga to help you kind of not get too far behind. And then once you can finally drop Krakatuga, you can just throw out your eruptions, disrupt your opponent's board, burn them for so many spirits that you might just be able to attack the Krakatuga for a game, honestly. And I really like that potential here for this card as well. So is it meta viable? I don't think so. I think it'll get run over too fast for this deck to be viable. Does that future potential in the future? Maybe if the deck meta really slows down, we get some even better water stall cards. I can see it, but I think we might also get some better payoffs for that. But is it fun? absolutely, and I cannot wait to build this deck because I think it'll be a lot of fun to get this to work. Very high skill cap as well. It's right up my alley. So the final group of cards I want to talk about is an Ascension package, all fueled by Tadpuff here, and then just all the water Ascensions, because we have quite a few. So starting with Tadpuff here, just the easiest way to easily get into any 2-Spirit Elestral. Just, it does cost a bit, but the fact that you just need this card hand plus another one, boom, you're good to go. Big thing holding this card back is it's just so easy to punch 2-Spirits Elestrals, and this is a dead card hand until you're ready to do so. So, yeah. You just rather do more proactive things right now. But if the meta ever slows down enough and you just want to keep dropping 2-Spirits, Tadpuff looks to be pretty good as well. You also need to make sure those 2-Spirit Elestrals have enough impact with Tadpuff to warrant having to use an extra Water Spirit to get into it as well. So that's the other note. So meta right now, no. Meta in the future, yeah, I could see it. If 2-Spirit Elestrals become better, they have higher impact, and we need to get into real quick, Tadpuff will be great for that. For fun decks, this card's amazing to enable just a more like mid-range combo, just really focusing around your 2 or 3 Spirit Elestrals. Tadpuff is phenomenal at enabling this because you no longer need to rely on having Elestral on board to be able to pull off this stuff. It's just a matter of being patient and answering whatever your opponent has to give your desired board state to make Tadpuff and wherever you go into the most impactful it can be. So yeah, watch out for this in fun strategies for the foreseeable future till we get a better card, because this card is going to be a huge enabler, and its only limit is how good are the targets you're ascending into, or really the cards that synergize with it. First 2-Spirit I want to talk about is its Ascension form, Zephrog. I think it's an interesting one. Not the most notable one, but it's interesting. Being able to attack the Spirit deck attack the Spirit deck directly is really good. Just burn some extra spirits, especially if you have some counter runes to kind of control your opponent's board. You can keep doing it, just kind of hitting over the top. So that's quite nice. You do give up actually answering your opponent's board, which you need to be very careful if you do that, and thus I think holds back Zephrog a little bit. But at the same time, it also has the added bonus of that looking at your opponent's hand and forcing them to discard a card, which is really powerful as well. If your opponent has like that Earthquake to answer Zephrog, pop, get it out of there. And your opponent's just like, well, how do I deal with it? So it definitely has some potential here. I just don't think the game is in a state where this card can really see success, because you really, most of what's threatening is on the board, not so much in hand, and you need ways to answer the board, and Zephrog just doesn't really do that. It honestly, the cases where you probably would be fine, you're probably winning anyway because you're answering the board. But if we enter a more combo heavy, or like you just need that one top end and you can easily like maybe search out Zephrog and such, I can see this same play as well. So for meta, totally is viable. I don't really think it will ever be viable, honestly, not unless you really need the discard, and that would just be a side deck kind of card. But for fun, this card definitely has some a lot of potential there, just being like a fun, like just way to easily get into cool utility cards to do wacky stuff. I've won a game with this card, just baiting out my opponent to go down to 1 spirit, just go Tadpuff, Zephrog, win, easy. So that's a lot of fun there. Watch out in that space, and also watch out for this in alternate formats. I know if we ever get a way to make alternate formats, mostly fan run, where like there's a sideboard with these cards that you can go into, this card seems really good, and water overall seems really good for that format with all the utility there, honestly. So and honestly, well, actually connecting that to the main game, or ways to maybe search out this card and maybe not let it be a brick in your hand. Watch out for this card. What I think is notably a better 2-Spirit Elestral is Krakking here. Just the ability to shut down 2 of your opponent's unoccupied Elestral slots is huge, and if you can get 2 to shut down your opponent's board, it is really hard to deal with overall. It can slow down your opponent so much you can just beat them down with Krakking. Pretty cool there, just a really great way to control the board here, and I feel like it's appropriate at the 2 cost. Is it good meta-wise? No. Do I think it'll ever be good? Probably not, but it's a really fun deck to play nonetheless. And you're going to see a lot with these like 2-Spirit Elestrals as well. Just a lot of fun. They do such cool stuff. I don't think it'll ever be meta, but who cares? It's going to make for a lot of fun, hype games in the casual format. And the big thing is just because if your opponent can find a way to remove this, yeah. And you also have to find a way to remove their Elestrals from their board for you to truly be able to block off those slots. It's also not easy to get a double Krakking out, honestly. Maybe once we get more discard support, you can tap up Krakking, Rising, summon another Krakking. So there's potential for it, and I think it will definitely steal some games. But I think it's one of those that, as long as the opponent's aware of, they can pretty easily play around this card. So hence why it's not going to be meta. So just wrapping up, because I might have said this already. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. Meta, nope. Future, probably not. Fun? Absolutely. Just definitely be mindful of this card when you're playing against your friends for fun. Another great fun card. I'm sorry, Washi. I know you love this card. It's a really cool one. But Javelantis, I have to classify as a fun card as well. Just the fact that it has to destroy a defense position Elestral to get that 3 damage piercing, I think really holds this card back. At most, I think this card could see siding potential if we're in a really slow defensive meta, as it's a great way to kind of pierce through it. But at the same time, that 6 attack, if we're in a slower meta, I imagine more defensive meta, I imagine that 2 spirits are easier to get out, and they're just going to wall Javelantis for the most part, unfortunately. If it had that Verutaqua effect, sure, but it doesn't. So I think it's really neat. It has some synergies with Tsunami as well, just be able to get that piercing, which is nice, which would be better than just the probably 1 damage you do if it attacked over attack position Elestral, but right now it does require too much setup, because it's already hard enough to get into 2 spirits and then have Tattoo Tsunami. Not many decks, more decks are looking more proactive. So just so this card is it going to be meta? No. Will it be meta in the future? I don't think it'll be meta, but I think it has some side potential just to help out, close out some more defensive matchups, give you an extra edge for some extra burn. Fun? Yeah, this card's going to be fun for sure. Just being able to try to make this work as we get more ways to switch your opponent's Elestrals to defense, just to be able to spearfish them Javelantis is going to be so much fun. So I can't wait to see what fellow water enthusiasts come up with as well. Because I know there's a few of you out there. I know I mentioned Washi, but I know Pure loves water as well. I feel like, and there's definitely more people as well. I feel like that those people can definitely come up with some fun stuff with this card, because really just takes someone truly passionate about this card, a card like this, to see its potential actualize, even if it's not meta. It's just a blast to see what cards like this can do. Moving on to Eyevory here. I think this is notably the least good of the 2 Spirit Waters. It's got a fine stat line for defense, and it gains 2 attack for every Typhlant in your Underworld. But the problem I have with this card is, can you get Typhlants in the Underworld? And you're only, like, 8 attacks, fine. It's good. But there's just easier ways to hit higher attack thresholds. And really, I think I'd rather throw out a 7 cost most of the time than try to get a Typhlant in the Underworld. And we already went over Typhlant. I don't think it's an amazing card either. So the fact that Synergize is not an amazing card usually means this is not an amazing card. But you can say, oh, well, maybe this card has the payoff for it. Well, you can spend a water to special cast a Typhlant for a roll attack position. Doesn't have big orb impact. Or whenever it's a discard effect, cool, you get to trigger it. But you're just lowering this card's attack. It kind of seems like a counter synergy. And you're really paying 2 for this card to lose 2 attack, get an extra Elestral on board with not great stats, and just to force a discard. I'm not convinced about this one. Maybe if it could expend 1 to cast any 1 Spirit Water Elestral, then we would be talking more proactive Capregal. But because it's not, I just don't think it's that great. Won't be meta. Don't think it'll ever be meta. Fun. Maybe we can come up with something, but I just think there are better cards with better payoffs for this card, and I don't even know what cards we could give it for this to be better payoff. I mean, I guess just ways to get Typhlants into the Underworld, maybe? But then you need to still get this card out. So I think this card is overall pretty unremarkable, but hey, I encourage you to try something out with Eyevory. Prove me wrong. Prove that there is some merit to this card. I just don't see much. Moving on to the last 2 Spirit Water Elestral, we've got Glauby here. And Glauby is an easy way to ascend into Majesea, just kind of like all the other 2 Spirit Elestrals from the starter decks. But notably, it needs 3 Enchanting Water Spirits to be able to ascend into Majesea from your hand or deck. So just an easy way to get out there. And there's definitely easy ways to do this. It's pretty easy to get Glauby out. You just go Tadpuff Glauby, and all you need is a Poseidon to Nexus 1 on there, and you can immediately go into Majesea. It just means you can run less Majeseas. And right now, I don't think it really matters, because if you have a Majesea in hand, all you need is like a Tadpuff and a Poseidon anyway to be able to get into a Majesea, because you just go Tadpuff, Poseidon, throw a Spirit onto Tadpuff, go into Majesea. So you need the same 2, it's still a 2-card combo, but where I see this being good is now you can run more copies of this to more readily kind of turbo into it, because now you have both Glauby and Majesea that you can have in hand. You just need now the Tadpuff and the Poseidon as well. Still a 3-card combo though, but at least you've got cards that can be a bit more consistent. I think where this is going to be most notable is in the future when we get more ways to accelerate spirits onto Elestrals. This is where Glauby is going to feel a lot better overall. Yeah, I think that's the big distinction there, but versus Majesea, because it's a lot easier to get into Glauby than it is Majesea. Just the 2 spirits. It's just a matter of what ways you have to put a 3rd spirit on it and to how does that compare to just going, again, the Tadpuff into Majesea, really? So, interesting there. Is it meta? Nope. Will it be meta in the future? I don't think so. I just think it's going to be too hard to get into Majesea, even though it has a nice effect. But I think in the Fun Sphere, this card's going to be great, especially once we get more ways to be able to get that Fun Spirit on Glauby for sure. Speaking of Majesea, we got Majesea here. Powerful here. Of note, because Glauby needs 3 spirits on it, it'll go up to 4 spirits once it does ascend, and that just gives Majesea an extra attack, meaning that will be at 10 attack, which is quite nice for a 3 spirit. Doesn't really contest many of the other 3 spirit Elestrals, but certainly contests everything 2 and 1 spirit. And that's quite nice. I think the most important thing about this card is just the fact that it has the protection effects against celestial effects, which is quite nice to protect your board, and you can definitely give it more other protection effects. Most noble, I'll go over Trident next to help shut off counter runes, so you just have to try to dodge your opponent's invoke runes. So definitely has some potential there. It's just be a big body that can be a bit tricky to deal with if you don't have the proper answer. The attack is nice just because it has overall low, the attack gain is nice because it has overall low attack. So ultimately, do I think it'll be meta? Nope. I think it's too hard to get this card out right now. You'd rather just rely on your 1 spirits. Do I think it has potential in the future? Not really. It's got a nice effect, I will admit. I just don't see it. I think it will always require too many cards to get this card out. And I think that Elestral Destruction will be the least concern of this deck. I think it's going to be more Rune Destruction, especially because I see slower metas where this card can really get out easily. I think you'd rather have Rune Protection in those. I could be wrong, though. For fun, again, amazing fun card. Can't wait to turbo into this, just blow out the opponent and such, have that protection effect, stop their Kinleos, their Boombats. Yeah, there's some fun stuff to be explored with this card, and I think it will only get better because of the Glauby and different ways to get spirits onto it as well. But I mentioned Trident. Let me go over that for the final card. And, well, before I go, actually, you know what, I'm including this here, and I'll explain why at the end. So Trident here, pretty unremarkable attack gain, but the nice thing is that it cannot be targeted by counter runes, which is not relevant right now. Can be once we get more counter runes. No counter runes really interact with that. But the important thing is if you have Poseidon out, which really right now you want to be able to help you ascend a bit easier, mainly into the Majesea, but also for Apheros shenanigans, which I think will really help these sort of decks that try to ascend to draw in more stuff. But anyway, Poseidon out, your opponent just can't cast counter runes. And that's huge. You still can. And you know, that's the craziest thing, is that your opponent can't, but you still can. So now your opponent has to deal with this to be able deal with the Trident or the Poseidon with the Rune Destruction to be able to opponent to interact. So I definitely see this having a lot of potential, just kind of having Poseidon up, which I think you'll want to. Throw out Trident on your Ascended Elestral, give it some extra protection. They can't immediately answer it. And with Majesea, now your opponent has to have a Rune effect to destroy, which right now would just be Laurels and Earthquake. That seems pretty good to me, because your opponent will always have it. And Earthquake's also pretty, well, I shouldn't say Earthquake's pretty expensive, but it just means your opponent kind of has to have Laurels or Earthquake, and they might not always have it, which makes this combo really powerful. And really with any 2-spirit Elestrals now, as well, just turning off your opponent's counter runes, not giving them the chance to respond, just means you get the initiative to really get some benefits off their effects, such as Capregal and such. It's just a matter of, is that enough advantage right now to warrant possibly losing your Elestral and a Trident having used 2 spirits on it next turn? And that's why I think this is going to be more relegated to the fun space, because I think in meta, it's just going to be too easily punished. So, meta viable? I don't think so. Potential in the future? Absolutely. I think shutting off counter runes is huge and very powerful. So I could see this card definitely being run in the future. And in fun space, yeah, this card's amazing. Again, shutting off counter runes, making your strategies more viable is phenomenal. But that kind of wraps up this package of 2-spirit Elestrals and Ascension package with Tadpuff that I wanted to, or 3-spirit with Majesea, that I wanted to talk about because I think Trident rounds it out quite nicely, giving it some protection effects against what your opponent can do to stop it on their turn. But that is Water. That's a review of Water. I think it has some potential here. I don't think it will be the most meta viable. One, because it requires more skill, and I think it will be easier just to take easier decks to tournaments when you have to play along. But I think it will be very rewarding for those who try it out. And I think this has the element that has one of the most potential moving forward, because it has a basis of a lot of cool cards, a lot of cool strategies that just maybe need a bit better payoff, a bit more favorable of a meta to go into. But there's a lot of, like, the cards in Water individually feel really powerful overall. It's just, again, it just doesn't fit into the meta quite right or together. Or I shouldn't say quite right, but doesn't quite fit into the meta right now. Doesn't quite fit together right now together for just insane synergies to really see it blow up. But With that being said, though, I'll have the playlist linked up above and down in the description so you can check out the other parts. Now, since this will probably be the third one going out, I'll probably just be Fire and Earth right now, but of course Wind and Thunder will be added once I post those. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below, and leave a comment down below with what you thought about my analysis. Do you agree or disagree with anything? Any more comments you'd like to add, questions you have? I love the conversation. I think it makes all of us better players. And of course, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you're notified when I upload the final 2 reviews, Thunder and Wind, as I said, but also further Elestrals content if you've been enjoying it, because I'm planning on doing deck profiles, gameplay, more card discussions, product openings once we finally get into that. So, yeah, if you're interested, please do that, and look forward to more content coming out real soon.